Senator Ed Markey led a congressional delegation that traveled to Taiwan earlier this month. The delegation met with Taiwanese leaders to discuss U.S.-Taiwan relations. The trip came just weeks after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's controversial visit sparked major tensions with China, which claims the island. Before Pelosi's trip, President Joe Biden spoke with the Chinese president in a phone call and reiterated that the U.S. does not support Taiwanese independence. However, he did note that he was opposed to Beijing attempting to unilaterally, quote, change the status quo. The delegation's visit to Taiwan was part of a larger visit to the Indo-Pacific region. Markey noted that, quote, there is no doubt that China is a bad actor in the region, and added that the U.S. should, quote, be focused on building partnerships based on the shared values of human rights, free speech, democracy, and a commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific.
The region. First, the United States must be present. The United States must be engaged. And after 4 years of tough talk and little action during the Trump years, our partners and allies welcomed a renewed interest by the Biden administration in engaging in the Indo-Pacific and doing so by actually listening to what our regional partners want and what they need. Our friends in East Asia and the Pacific are dealing with the convergence of multiple existential threats, including North Korea's nuclear program, the impacts of climate change, of which they are bearing the brunt, and the government of China's increasingly bellicose threats, debt trap diplomacy, and exports of authoritarian surveillance and censorship. They need the United States to stay engaged in the region now more than ever. Second, there is no doubt that China is a bad actor in the region. However, our partners and allies do not want to be pawns in a competition or conflict between the United States and China. Our policies in the Indo-Pacific must focus on engagement with each individual country on its own merits, not simply through the lens of China. We should be focused on building partnerships based on the shared values of human rights, free speech, democracy, and a commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. And we need to back up our commitment to consistent engagement in the region with increased investment, building economic ties, and assistance to help our friends combat poverty, address health threats, and build resiliency and adaptation to the impacts of climate change. Third, we need to lead with our values, as that's what's ultimately distinguishing us from authoritarian China and makes the United States a valued partner in the region. We must continue to stand up for free speech, human rights, and political and civil rights. As Xi Jinping continues his crackdown against Hong Kong, Tibet, and Xinjiang, he shows his true colors to the world and inadvertently inspires a new generation of young people who understand what it means to face persecution and censorship in their home country. In South Korea and Taiwan, I discussed with leaders how we can work together to champion universal values across the region. In Cambodia, I met with Kem Sokha, an opposition leader who has been targeted, harassed, and detained and been put on trial over and over again for his work to bring democracy to the Cambodian people. I also met with young Cambodian civil society leaders who are bravely fighting for labor, media, political, and environmental rights. I was also struck by the strength of the Cambodian spirit, which I see in our Cambodian communities here at home in the Commonwealth, Lowell, Massachusetts especially. So many members of this community fled a brutal civil war in Cambodia to make their home in the United States and have flourished, becoming pillars of our communities. In the Philippines, where I was previously banned by the prior governmental administration, the Duterte administration, I was pleased to lead to the first foreign delegation to meet President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. since his inauguration. On our trip, we came up against bureaucrats who didn't want us to meet with former Senator Leila de Lima, a political prisoner who has been jailed for years for her work fighting the previous government's corruption and crimes. Ultimately, we prevailed, and we got to hear from her directly how she has managed to continue her fight for justice, even as she passes the 2,000-day mark in detention. In our conversations with the new government, we made clear our calls for human rights, freedom of the press, democratic institutions, and our hope in the promise of a new era in the U.S.-Philippine relationship with the incoming administration. And finally, as China ramps up its outrageous and dangerous response to my trip, which followed on the heels of Speaker Pelosi's trip to Taiwan, I believe now, more than ever, it is incumbent on the United States to stand with Taiwan and to take a steady approach. China has said that it's not a good time for me or for other U.S. legislators to visit Taiwan. But for China, there will never be a good time for an American delegation to visit Taiwan. The Chinese government used the opportunity of my visit and Speaker Pelosi's recent trip to Taiwan to overreact and to escalate tensions. This is an outsized reaction to congressional travel that has been a consistent, regular feature of U.S.-Taiwan relationship since the 1979 Taiwan Relations Act, which I voted for on the floor of the United States House of Representatives in 1979. This is something which built the framework for stability across the Taiwan Strait. No one tells me where to stand, and no one tells me where to travel. It is imperative that we keep our relations strong with the Taiwanese government. But we cannot respond in kind to Chinese escalation. And it's our moral responsibility to do everything we can to maintain peace, stability, and deterrence across the Taiwan Strait. I thank the delegation for joining me in this very important trip, and I'm looking forward to any questions which you may have of me today.
Senator, what is the U.S.
Can you just tell me who?
Janet Bloomberg.
Oh, good to see you. Yeah.
Janet Bloomberg. What is the U.S. willing to do to support continued independence for Taiwan?
Well, our policy should be to focus on maintaining peace, on continuing to build our economic and cultural ties with Taiwan, to help them prepare their own self-defense, and sustaining the decades-long cross-strait deterrence that has allowed Taiwan to prosper into one of the most successful nations in the Indo-Pacific region.
You're talking about the history of travel following Nancy Pelosi's trip, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's trip, and yours. Are we going to see more U.S. lawmakers visiting Taiwan?
I don't think there should be any discontinuation at all of the tradition of American lawmakers visiting Taiwan. There have been numerous over the years, and I expect them to continue.
Can you give us a little bit of the behind-the-scenes tension leading up? A lot of people were very worried about House Speaker Pelosi's trip there, also worried about yours, some fearing that there might even be military violence, and none of them agreed. Can I ask you, how did the negotiations go between lawmakers as far as supporting this trip?
Well, We told the Biden administration that we were going to take this trip. We were not dissuaded from taking the trip by the administration. We made it very clear that our goal was to attempt to maintain peaceful relations between Taiwan and China, to ensure that we put policies in place that would help to continue that policy that has been successful since 1979, that a policy of strategic ambiguity and a one China policy has worked and it should be maintained. And with that, we went off on this mission, and we have returned, I think, having been successful in helping to advance those goals. Yes, sir.
Hi, Senator. Matt Metzger with Boston Herald. So the Chinese increased their military presence, their military actions around Taiwan as a consequence of both your trip and Nancy Pelosi's trip. If they were to take the next step and actually invade the island of Taiwan, what recourse does the United States government have? Are we going to get involved in a military conflict over Taiwan?
Well, I think our goal should be to state that we want to continue a one China policy, that we're going to continue a policy of strategic ambiguity, and that we're going to continue a policy of strengthening the deterrence of the Taiwanese government against an attack by China, while also strengthening our economic ties to the Taiwanese economy. So I think if we do those things, that our goal ultimately should be to avoid a military conflict between Taiwan and the government of China.
Do you think the Chinese government is emboldened by the actions of Russian President Vladimir Putin in Ukraine?
I think we have to ensure that there is a clear message that's being sent to the Chinese that we are going to help to provide the deterrent military capability to the Taiwan government, and that we're going to see a determined increase in the economic partnership that we have with Taiwan. Taiwan is the ninth largest trading partner of the United States of America. We're dependent upon semiconductors, which come from Taiwan to the United States. 90% of the chips come from Taiwan. And so we need them for our economy, we need them for our defense, we need them for our healthcare system. And so it's very important for us to continue to deepen those ties economically as well with the Taiwan government.
But asking that question again, how much of a factor is the Russian invasion in this timing? Did you think that it was necessary to visit Taiwan now because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and that possibly emboldening Chinese leadership?
Well, I am the chair of the East Asia Subcommittee, and it was, I thought, appropriate for me to visit Taiwan, but also Cambodia and the Philippines and South Korea, because each one of those countries has right now a very important and sensitive diplomatic relationship with the United States. And obviously, the Russian invasion of Ukraine is something that's on the minds of people in Taiwan, and I felt that it was important to go in order to reassure the government of Taiwan and the people of Taiwan that the United States wanted to continue its friendship, its partnership that stretches back to the 1979 Taiwan Relations Act.
Well, thinking about recourse, though, if something were to happen, it would be much more difficult to isolate China economically than it has been to attempt to isolate Russia. So again, what recourse would the U.S. have if China were emboldened to do something at this time?
Well, again, I think what the United States should do is to, again, deepen our economic ties and to ensure that we provide the defensive weaponry to the Taiwan government so that they can try to maintain this peaceful relationship across the straits, which has characterized this one China policy for more than a generation.
Senator, just because you mentioned the shuttles on the way in, do you have anything to say about the state of the MBTA?
It's imperative that the T get fixed. It's imperative that we guarantee it not happen again. Obviously, workers and students across this region are dependent upon the T to get to work, to get to school. We need a deep partnership between the City of Boston, the State of Massachusetts, and the Federal Transit Authority in order to make sure that this gets fixed and that it never happens again. I know, as someone who had to take the T to go to Boston College as a commuter, that if you don't have a car and if you need to get to school, that without the T, it gets very complicated very fast. And the same thing is true for people who have to get to work. So right now, we just have to focus upon all of the inconvenience that is being created by the shutdown of the T. Make sure it gets fixed as quickly as possible. Make sure it's done right, and make sure it's done on a permanent basis. So my hearts go out to people as someone who was a commuter to Boston College, who had a father who was dependent upon the T to get to work at the Hood Milk Company every single morning. I know that those workers and those students of today have that same dependence and want the T to be fixed as quickly and permanently as possible.
Do you think it should have gone into federal receivership for repairs?
I think there should be a partnership between the Massachusetts state government, the City of Boston, and the federal government. I think that partnership has to come together, work quickly, and to fix it on a very rapid basis over the next month, with the objective of ensuring that history does not repeat itself again. If it does, then I think we have to visit that question of receivership. Let us hope that this 1 month gives us a chance to fix all of those problems. I know that there are many people in Greater Boston who are looking at this with an arched eyebrow, wondering whether or not this is the conclusion of all of those problems. Let's just keep our fingers crossed, urge all of these workers to come together to fix the problem, and then hope that it doesn't repeat itself.
But Senator, it's one line on an entire aging system, so it will happen again. So what would you say looking forward, what needs to be done?
Again, we have to have a very strong working partnership between the federal government and the MBTA. We have to ensure that the funding continues to come in from the federal government in order to help to accomplish that goal. There should be an affirmative vote this November on the Fair Share Act on the ballot, which will put a tax on millionaires that will provide billions of additional dollars for transportation and education in the state of Massachusetts. That's the only way to make sure that the resources are there to deal with the continued need to upgrade and maintain the T and its service to Greater Boston. Okay. And I did say government of Taiwan. I just want to make sure that that it's authority, the Taiwanese authority, so that I correct that terminology if I may. So thank you all so much. Thanks for joining us. Much appreciated.